Hello, this is Cio Rodriguez. Welcome to our CISSP review questions. We are just at the beginning, of course, still on domain 1, security and risk management. In this section, we were going to cover questions 21 to 40. Question 21. Under the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which of the following is allowed? Under the GDPR, information collected from users can be shared with exclusive permission, so that is allowed. The European Union and General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, basically the EU has implemented several laws and regulations that affect security and privacy. The EU principles on privacy include strict laws to protect private data. The EU's Data Protection Directive provides direction on how to follow the laws set forth in the principles. The EU then created the Safe Harbor privacy principles to help guide US organizations in compliance with the EU principles on privacy. Some of the guidelines include the following. 1. Data should be collected in accordance with the law. 2. Information collected about an individual cannot be shared with other organizations unless given explicit permission by the individual. 3. Information transferred to other organizations can be transferred only if the sharing organization has adequate security in place. 4. Data should be used only for the purpose for which it was collected. And 5. Data should be used only for a reasonable period of time. Question 22. The level of risk an organization is prepared to accept is best known as what? Risk reception, risk redress, risk mitigation, or risk appetite? Risk appetite is the level of risk an organization is prepared to accept. The risk appetite for an organization can only be defined based on the organization's needs, and risk appetites will vary from organization to organization. Question 23. Which administrative control prescribes that users should be given access only to resources required to do their job? Separation of duties, job rotation, need to know or list privilege, or mandatory vacations? The correct answer is need to know or list privilege. The listed administrative controls address the following concerns. Need to know or list to privilege is a concept that, or the concept that users should be given access only to resources required to do their job. Separation of duties is the concept that prescribes that sensitive operations be divided among multiple users so that no one user has the rights and access to carry out the operation alone. Job rotation refers to training of multiple users to perform the duties of a position to help prevent fraud by any individual employee. And mandatory vacations is requiring all users to take time off, allowing another to fill their position while gone, which enhances the opportunity to discover unusual activity. Which of the following is the estimated amount of time a device will operate before a failure occurs? RPO, MPTD, MTTR, MTBF, WRT, or RTO? The correct answer is MTBF. The listed options are defined as follows. The maximum tolerable downtime, or MTD, is the maximum amount of time that an organization can tolerate a single resource or function being down. This is also referred to as maximum period time of disruption, or MPTD. The mean time to repair, or MTTR, is the average time required to repair a single resource or function when a disaster or disruption occurs. Mean time between failure, or MTBF, is the estimated amount of time a device will operate before a failure occurs. This amount, if calculated by the device vendor, in other words, is calculated by the device vendor. System reliability is increased by a higher MTBF and a lower MTTR. Recovery time objective, or RTO, is the shortest time period after a disaster or disruptive event within which a resource or function must be restored to avoid unacceptable consequences. RTO assumes that there is an acceptable period of downtime. RTO should be smaller than MTD. Work recovery time, WRT, is the difference between the RTO and the MTD, which is the remaining time that is left over after the RTO before reaching the maximum tolerable um, amount of time. The recovery point objective, or RPO, is the point in which the disruptive resource or function must be returned. These key terms are extremely important to know the difference. You can be absolutely sure that you're going to get several questions in the CISSP exam about one or several of these important concepts. Question 25. In which biometric system is the distance between facial features measured and recorded? Iris scan, retina scan, eigenfeatures facial scan, or eigenfaces facial scan? The correct answer is eigenfeatures facial scan. In an eigenfeatures facial scan, the distance between the facial features are measured and recorded. In an iris scan, the colored portion of the eye, including all rifts, coronas, and furrows, are scanned. In a retina scan, the retina's blood vessel pattern is scanned. In an eigenfaces facial scan, measurements of facial components are gathered and compared to a set of standard eigenfaces. Question 26. Beginning on May 25, 2018, the members of the EU began applying which of the following? Basel II, GPDR, Safe Harbor, should be the GDPR, Safe Harbor, or data havens? The correct answer is the GDPR. The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, applies to EU-based organizations that collect or process the personal data of EU residents, and to organizations outside the EU that monitor behavior or offer goods and services to EU residents. Question 27. Which factors should be considered when accessing asset value? Asset procurement costs, asset development costs, asset maintenance costs, statements A and B only, statements B and C only, statements A and C only, or all these statements. All the listed factors should be considered when accessing asset value. Question 28. Which evidence is based on what the witness thinks, feels, or infers regarding the facts? Corroborative evidence, opinion evidence, conclusive evidence, or circumstantial evidence? Opinion evidence is based on what the witness thinks, feels, or infers regarding the facts. Corroborative evidence supports another piece of evidence. Conclusive evidence does not require any other corroboration and cannot be contradicted by any other evidence. And circumstantial evidence provides inference of information from other intermediate relevant facts. Question 29. Which of the following are considered best practices and are specific in nature? A. Standards, B. Frameworks, C. Methodologies, or D. Guidelines? The correct answer is standards. Frameworks, standards, and methodologies are often discussed together because they are related. Standards are accepted as best practices, whereas frameworks are practices that are generally employed. Standards are specific, while frameworks are general. Methodologies are a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules used by those who work in a discipline. Question 30. Which step in a penetration test makes an attempt to gain unauthorized access? A. Discovery, B. Exploitation, C. Enumeration, D. Report, E. Vulnerability mapping. The correct answer is exploitation. A penetration test should include the following steps. Discovery, which obtained the footprint and information about the target. Enumeration, where the penetration tester performed port scans and resource identification. Vulnerability mapping, which identify vulnerabilities in systems and resources. Exploitation, which attempts to gain unauthorized access by exploiting the vulnerabilities. And finally, the report, where the results are given to management with suggested countermeasures. Question 31. Which security policies provide instruction on acceptable and unacceptable activities? A. Informative security policies, regulatory security policies, system-specific security policies, or advisory security policies. Advisory security policies provide instruction on acceptable and unacceptable activities. Informative security policies provide information on certain topics and act as an educational tool. Regulatory security policies address specific industry regulations, including mandatory standards. System-specific security policy address security for a specific computer, network, technology, or application. Question 32. What should you identify immediately after the threats and vulnerabilities are determined during a risk assessment as part of NIST SP 800-30? A. Assets and their value. B. Risk. C. Likelihood. Or D. Impact. The correct answer is C. Likelihood. SP 800-30 gives the following steps for a risk management. 1. Identify the assets and their value. 2. Identify threats. 3. Identify vulnerabilities. 4. Determine likelihood. 5. Identify impact. And 6. Determine risk as a combination of likelihood and impact. So it is important to understand that for risk to exist, there has to be a combination of a likelihood or a probability and an impact. Question 33. Which framework is presented in the form of a three-dimensional matrix? COSO broadly defines ERM, or Enterprise Risk Management, as the culture, capabilities, and practices integrated with the strategy setting and its execution that organizations rely on to manage risk in creating, preserving, and realizing value. The ERM framework is presented in the form of a three-dimensional matrix. The matrix includes four categories of objectives across the top: strategic, operations, reporting, and compliance. There are 8 components of enterprise risk management. Finally, the organization, its divisions and business units are depicted as the third dimension of the matrix for applying the framework. So the figure of the COSO framework looks like this, right? So COSO stands for Committed of Sponsoring Organizations of the Trade Commissioned. And it's a voluntary private sector organization established in the United States dedicated to providing guidance to executive management and governance entities on critical aspects of organizational governance, business ethics, internal control, enterprise risk management, fraud, and financial reporting. COSO has established a common internal control model against which companies and organizations may assess their control systems. This is a very it's a popular framework, but it's used only on very large multinational corporations. Question 34. Your organization has adopted the following user accounts policies. 1. All user accounts must be at least 8 characters in length. 2. All user accounts should contain the user's first name followed by the user's last name initial. 3. Inactive user accounts should be disabled after 60 days of inactivity. 4. User accounts belonging to terminated employees should be deleted at time of termination. 6. Disabled user accounts should be deleted after 100 days of inactivity. So which system affects the revocation step of the identity life cycle? So A, policy 1 only. B, policy 1 and 2 only. C, policy 2 and 3 only. D, policy 3 only. E, policy A and 4 only, or all the policies. Policy 4 and 5 affect the revocation step of the identity life cycle. Policy 1 and 2 affect the provisioning step of the identity life cycle, and policy 3 affects the review step of the identity life cycle. Now, to be able to answer a question like the one that we just went through, it's important to understand what is the identity life cycle. The identity life cycle outlines the stages of managing user identities and their access to resources within an organization's information systems. The identity life cycle typically involves the following stages. One, identification, which is the process of identifying users and establishing their unique digital identity within the system. This involves creating user accounts and assigning identifiers. Two, authentication, verifying the claim identity of users through various methods such as passwords, biometrics, tokens, or multi-factor authentication. Three, authorization, determining the level of access and permissions that authenticated users should have based on their roles and responsibilities. Four, accounting or auditing, which is monitoring and recording user activities, including logins, access attempts, and resource usage for audit and compliance purposes. Five, provisioning, which is granting or provisioning access to resources based on user roles and policies. This can involve manual or automated processes. Six, deprovisioning or revocation, which is removing access and permissions when users no longer require them due to job changes, terminations, or other reasons. Seven, review and recertification. Regulatory reviewing regularly reviewing user access rights and permissions to ensure that they are still appropriate and align with business needs. Eight, synchronization and integration, ensuring consistency of identity information across various systems and applications. Single sign-on or SSO, enabling users to access multiple systems and applications with a single set of credentials. 10, federation, allowing users from different organizations to access share resources based on trust relationships. 11, privilege access management or PAM, managing and monitoring privileged accounts with higher level of access to sensitive systems and data. And 12, password management, which is implementing policies and technologies to ensure a strong and secure password practices. Question 35. During which step of the identity life cycle does auditing occur? Auditing occurs during the review step of the identity life cycle. During the revocation step of the identity life cycle, user accounts are revoked or removed. During the provisioning step of the identity life cycle, user accounts are created. This step can also be referred to as creation. Question 36. What kind of tool is Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer or MBSA? MBSA is a vulnerability assessment application. Vulnerability assessment applications include Nessus, Open Vulnerability Assessment System or OpenVAS, Core Impact, NextPose, GFI LandGuard, QualisGuard, and Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer or MBSA. Of these applications, OpenVAS and MBSA are free, although the others have also a free subscription. For example, Nessus has a free version for up to like about 16 or 15 computers. If you need more than that, which if you're a company you need more than that, then you would have to buy either there's a professional and enterprise versions as well. Question 37. Which of the following details appropriate use of information systems, handling standards, monitoring, and privacy expectations? A. AUP, B. NDA, C. SLA, or D. MBA? The correct answer is A. AUP. An AUP, or an accepting user policy, details appropriate use of information systems, handling standards, monitoring, and privacy expectations. Question 38. What defines the minimum level of security or performance? A. Procedures, B. Standards, C. Guidelines, or D. Baselines? Baselines define the minimal level of security or performance. Procedures are the detailed instructions used to accomplish a task or goal. Standards are the mandated rules that govern the acceptable level of security. Guidelines are the actions that are suggested when standards are not applicable in a particular situation. Question 39. How often should an organization review the business continuity scope? The correct answer is statement C and D only. So that means that an organization should review the business continuity scope annually and whenever a significant change occurs in the organization. Question 40, and this is the last question of this section. Which term is used for a flaw or weakness in the system, software or hardware? A. Safeguard, B. Vulnerability, C. Exposure, D. Trigger. A vulnerability is a flaw or weakness in the system, software, or hardware. A safeguard is a control designed to counteract a threat. An exposure is an instance of being subjected or exposed to losses from a threat, and a trigger is an event that indicates that a risk has occurred or is about to occur. Thanks for watching. Please give me a like on my YouTube channel. This will help me a lot to continue producing these videos. In the next section, we are going to continue with objective 1 of the CISSP exam. So we're going to be looking at questions from 41 to 60. Thank you. See you then.